In the frenzied battle between Team China and Team Devil, the battle of the Xians was filled with many variables and great power. In terms of merely power, there was a battle that wasn't any lesser than the Xians, which was the face-off between the cultivators. Cultivators, it was a path of power different from the genetic constraint. If inferring from the clues they already knew, the first cultivator was a saint. Although later cultivators didn't have saints amongst them, being able to resist the other saints using cultivation, starting the Grand Primordial War and also forcing the saints to stop the war showed that the might of cultivation was unimaginable. If a saint's growth was described as unlocking the power of one's body and using their body to manipulate the power within the universe, cultivation would be a science. They used rune technology to create various treasures of great power and to train their bodies, thus reaching a level not inferior to the saints. Overall, the greatest strength of cultivation techniques was their fundamental knowledge of rune technology. That was its true essence. The two representatives of cultivation here, one Luo Yinglong, only possessed the cultivation techniques for training the body, and the most orthodox school of it. It was a cultivation manual obtained from one of the worlds and was something outsiders would never be able to obtain. The other not only had the techniques for training the body, but also a weapon clone Xian had made by substituting rune technology with scientific technology. It wasn't an orthodox school of cultivation, with neither the technique nor weapon complete. Even so, the two's battle had turned the surrounding area into ashes for kilometers around as if the area had suffered a nuclear strike. The man on a sword had used a secret weapon to control the might of the heavenly Dao, blasting Yinglong who hadn't been able to guard in time deep underground. He had merged his body with the heavenly Dao lightning bolts, then bombarded Yinglong with mighty power in an unending stream in a process akin to self-denotation. When the attacks finally stopped, a crater kilometers in size and unfathomable depth was left. The man on a sword was shockingly still alive, but his face was incomparably pale as he levitated in the air. He was obviously not far from death. Too much refined chi was consumed, and my life force and light of the soul was depleted as well. I'll die in minutes. Xian was right. The power of this heavenly Dao lightning is infinite, and I can only display 1% at most. If I had already overcome my tribulation and become an immortal, perhaps this strike would have caused the continent itself to crack. As expected of a pinnacle weapon of cultivation that equals the magic cannon. Luo Yinglong should have died, right? Lil Sis life should be. We're just chess pieces in this scheme. I ask you to what end? Was it worth it? A profound voice echoed out in the man on a sword's mind. He didn't know where the sound was coming from. At the same time, a streak of azure light shot out from the crater which came to a halt in front of him. The azure light was precisely a flying sword, with Luo Yinglong safe and sound above it. Although he couldn't be called perfectly safe and sound, what with his clothes all more or less completely ripped apart and the numerous flags that protected him broken apart, he still looked in much better condition than the man on a sword. Curiously, his eyes were blank, not in the way of when the genetic constraint was unlocked, but as if the myriad worlds were contained within it. The depths and ends of it couldn't be seen, and his expression contained a seriousness that had never appeared before, completely unlike his usual joking expression. Whatever. Since I've already showed my power, he is definitely aware of it already, so why carry on the charade of being weak? Yinglong gave a heavy sigh. He rubbed his palms together, and thousands of rays of azure light were let off, each a puerilely sharp sword chi. It enveloped the area a kilometer around within short seconds. Before this azure light, everything, be it rock or metal, turned to dust. The man on a sword wasn't even able to utter a sound before he too turned to nothing, becoming dust. Damn it, the injuries from this battle were too severe. Even my life-bound magical treasure was wrecked. I can no longer deploy the 12 evil gods formation. I already knew I was going to die in this final battle and was planning to borrow Zheng's main character Destiny to revive in Team China, then cooperate with them to fight him and become the chess player myself. I thought I would be able to rely on my life-bound evil god's flag's divine ability to overcome this tribulation after refining it. Who knew that divine abilities can't overturn fate? I haven't even determined a victor between my Jinx, Luo Gondo, and I, and it's broken here already. Looks like I'm going to die here. Many thoughts crossed Yinglong's mind, and when he thought about the fatal calamity coming his way, his heart felt restless again. Zheng's main character Destiny still had some changes. The two Zhengs were a Zheng and who the main character was not fixed in stone. The final battle was not truly a final battle, but instead to determine the position of the main character. If his choice was wrong and the main character was actually clone Zheng, his revival would become a dream. Thus, the best method would still be to not die. Now, his evil god's flags that he had been relying on the most was broken, so how was he to face this fatal calamity? It'll be great if I still had the 8 trigrams formation. The cauldron of the 8 trigrams isn't weaker than the evil god's formation, and maybe using its purple flames to burn that Eva may be more effective than summoning the evil gods. I don't know if it's still in good condition though. Yinglong didn't know that Zheng had long since used the 8 flags in the experiment to obtain refined chi. It was said that with the Dao, becoming an immortal was as easy as flipping over your hand, while without the Dao, it became as hard as ascending to the heavens. Zheng had neither cultivation techniques nor physique, but had forcibly obtained refined chi through Xian's help. The 8 flags' contribution in this couldn't be understated. Whatever. There's still some unfinished karma left. Although I divined out that she would definitely die. If Adam succeeded in instrumentality, why did he still lose? Well, this is good too. He will definitely be worried if Adam didn't die, and perhaps our world may end in an instant. And the souls he absorbed can't revive if he's not dead. In the end, it's a good thing. Whatever. I'll go and meet Adam first, resolve this karma then go all out. Yinglong sighed heavily again, before looking off in a certain direction then flying off there on his flying sword. As Luo Yinglong was displaying his full power, the faraway Adam was being eaten by Luo Gondo. The survivors from Team China all flew off in the direction the ropes went, leaving only the Eva that was wrapped up in a sphere of light behind. The Eva was a half-mechanical lifeform with a mechanical exterior and organic interior, with an enormous body several meters tall. The mechanical exterior had mostly come apart minus a few critical and important parts. Its body was already covered in purple muscles and there were over 10 wings behind its back, which had reached a wingspan of 30 to 40 meters each. Where am I? I remember I was integrating with the Eva and about to fight Luo Yinglong and those from Team China. Did I kill them? Or did they run away? Gondo tested out his limbs, and didn't immediately recover from his confusion as he looked around to find his surroundings in ruins. It seemed a brutal battle had taken place, and the current scene didn't seem to have been caused by his Eva. Strange. Who was I fighting with? Did I run out of light of the soul, and I woke up after detaching from the Eva? And the opponent didn't kill me? Or had I already completely annihilated the enemy? He tested out his limbs again, only to abruptly realize he was floating in the air, and what his eyes were looking at weren't the arms of a human, but the giant purple arms of an Eva. The Eva had somehow become his body. What exactly had happened? This power. What is this power within my body? Light of the soul is rushing out from the depths of my soul in an endless stream. My God, this power, is the power when the fifth stage is unlocked. Gondo looked disbelievingly at his hands, or rather, used the Eva's eyes to look at the Eva's hands. He swung an arm lightly, and a visible diamond-shaped AT field appeared around his arm. The light swing resulted in the 1 to 2 cubic meters of AT field being tossed to the ground, which immediately let out a sun-like radiance and exploded, blowing apart the surrounding hundreds of meters into dust. The resulting dust cloud swallowed up Gondo as well, until the Eva shot out like a purple streak of lightning when the dust cloud reached a height of 100 meters tall. Ha 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 ha. I can finally get revenge. This power can definitely let me kill everyone in Team China. No one can stop me, ha ha ha, no one can stop me. Gondo laughed madly. Perhaps the sudden possession of an unimaginable power really had pushed his mental state into insanity. As his shouting ended, the over 10 wings on his back extended and created over 10 cubic meters of AT field behind its back which promptly exploded. The enormous Eva borrowed this enormous force to vanish into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Gondo had been in a comatose state since absorbing Adam. This period had gone on for very long. Half a minute after he left, an azure streak of light, which was Yinglong on his flying sword, sped over from the direction opposite of where Gondo had gone to. However, he had come a little too late, as Adam had already been eating and Gondo had already become a true fatal disaster for him. Divine abilities really don't match up to fate. Luo Gondo unexpectedly profited from a disaster and grew to this stage. This should be his doing. Yinglong didn't hurry to catch up to Gondo, instead bringing his flying sword to a stop and landed at the spot Adam had conducted his instrumentality. He took out a turtle shell and several circular tablets that were made of neither metal nor wood and fiddled with them as he sat there. He inserted the circular tablets into the turtle shell and gave it light shakes, slowly getting more and more anxious and serious the more he shook. A few minutes later, he spat a large mouthful of fresh blood onto the shell, weakly falling to the ground at the same time. He only got up after a while, and the circular tablets inside the shell had already turned into powder. As the wind blew, the air around Yinglong was suffused with powder. I see. So, the instrumentality went that way. Turn all the basic building blocks of life, amino acids, DNA, and cells into amniotic fluid, then absorb the organism's light of the soul, and the light of the soul will become peerless through the process of merger. The ultimate life form which has reached the sixth stage is such an existence. Unfortunately, this ultimate life form wasn't complete. Adam's instrumentality was heavily sabotaged in its initial stages. Thus, he needed to absorb large quantities of light of the soul to begin the instrumentality again, but Luo Gondo at this time, Yinglong muttered to himself, and with a wave of his hand, the powder transformed again into a circular tablets that fell into his hand. Yinglong finally stood up again at this point. Adam being sabotaged at the start was a coincidence. So was Team China's secret weapon and Luo Gondo's coincidental arrival. If he appeared slightly earlier or later, he would have been absorbed by Adam. All these coincidences stacked together have a probability of happening that can only be described as a miracle. But miracles don't happen in this world. All this could only have been a conscious action. He was afraid of Adam's sixth stage, afraid of Adam breaking out of this universe. So, Yinglong exhaled as a hypothesis appeared in his mind. Perhaps. He is a peerless existence to our world, but in the world he is from, he is a weakling. Thinking so much about it now was useless, he had already been delayed here for too long. He didn't know if Gondo had already gone to Zheng and cloned Zheng's battlefield. The battle there would determine who would have the main character destiny. No outsider could be allowed to interfere. Although he couldn't be sure if the current Gondo had the power to deal with Zheng and clone Zheng, he didn't dare allow Gondo to affect his sole chance of survival either. Thus, he had to stop this unlucky star of his no matter what. The final battle had already reached its most critical point. Every battle had either already started or ended. For example, one of the three powers that could decide the result, the Angel Alliance, had been completely annihilated. Adam's instrumentality had not been perfectly executed, and him who had transformed into the ultimate life form had been eaten. All these changes were enough to influence the conclusion of the final battle. Of course, the place where the conclusion would truly be decided was that fated battle between those two. We meet again. At the moment Zheng and Clone Zheng met, Clone Zheng had been guarding the entrance to the valley the underground basement was in. His black flames had locked down the entire valley as well as the small hill he was on. Normal people couldn't even consider coming near. It was only when Zheng flew over and used a powerful chop had these endless flames been parted into two sections. Clone Zheng no longer released black flames, instead looking calmly as Zheng walked to him, the two watching other like this. It's been so long. You've chased up to me at long last. Before, I thought no one would ever be able to chase up to me ever again. Unexpectedly, the first to chase up to me would be the me I killed once upon a time. Clone Zheng was sitting on a giant rock as he looked at Zheng. No, I didn't chase up to you. Indeed, in the past I was chasing after you, believing that as long as I exceeded you, I wouldn't lose anything again. But I was wrong, completely wrong. Power isn't what I want. I just need the power to protect my convictions. I don't actually have to catch up to you, because what will determine whether I can beat you isn't our power, but whether I have the conviction to protect. Zheng said seriously as he grasped Tiger's soul. Zheng paused before continuing, the closer I get to you, the more I can sense how powerful you are. The gap between us is still so large. Perhaps I closed it by an amount that's not significant compared to Resident Evil Apocalypse, but I can still only look up to you as with before. But this isn't a reason to lose. I have no reason to lose. I have those I want to protect, and we've already promised to make Team China stand as the apex of God's realm. My clone, let us begin our fight. Clone Zheng had been looking carefully at him, and shook his head and sighed, looking at the sky when Zheng finished speaking. I originally thought since we were one and the same person, you would become strong just like me after experiencing a complete extermination of your team. Who knew? You walked the completely and utterly opposite path of mine that couldn't be any more different. Forget all that. All that feelings, conviction, protecting or whatever. That's just a weakling's excuse for being weak and to cover up your hard-headedness. Come. I shall show you what the words real power actually mean. As his words fell, Clone Zheng leapt up from his rock and his broadsword came hacking down, and the broadsword and Tiger's soul crashed heavily against the other. However, the result was surprising. Despite borrowing his downward momentum, Clone Zheng was the one pushed back by the unmoving Zheng. In terms of raw power, Zheng was much stronger than his clone. Use your black flames. 10 of you aren't my match if we're speaking in terms of raw power. After all, our paths of power are different, and mine is one of pure power. Zheng didn't chase after to attack, instead shaking Tiger's soul as he spoke. The saber edge was actually covered in a layer of black flames that were burning on nothing, which vanished upon his shaking it. Clone Zheng, who was sent flying back, extended his wings, coming to a halt in the air. He didn't say anything, but only silently looked at the skies. When his head lowered again, his black flames began to become more energetic, and black flames began to encircle 2 meters around him. The flames seemed to have a will of their own, only encircling his body and sword, and never moving away or closer. It was even more obedient than a pet. This is my light of the soul, sin flame. All the hatred, cruelty, weakness, and negative emotions in my heart all turn tangible. You wish to see my true power? Then survive and fight me. With a wave of his hand, Clone Zheng sent flames cascading towards Zheng like a waterfall. Zheng didn't dare to be negligent and brandished Tiger's soul, using instant destruction to slash out. If this strike connected solidly with the hill, it would have cut in half. However, unlike before when he easily parted the wall of flames, Tiger's soul ground to a halt in this clash, while the flames coiled around Tiger's soul towards Zheng. A light blade appeared around Tiger's soul as refined chi was poured into it. He didn't withdraw Tiger's soul, instead taking advantage of the opportunity to rend the flames apart. The remaining flames all returned to Clone Zheng's side, as if that waterfall of flames had only been an illusion. Your sin flames actually have defensive properties too. What a terrifying enhancement. The power of that strike before should have been something even your body wouldn't have been able to withstand, but such a small amount of flames was able to block it. Zheng sighed, but his hands didn't stop moving and his legs used Saru, instantly bringing him before his clone. Tiger's soul was wrapped around in a glittering light blade as it came chopping down. It was like scissors meeting cloth as the light blade easily sheared through the outer flames, as Clone Zheng within the black flames held his broadsword aloft to welcome Tiger's soul. The two crashed loudly once again, this time reaching a stalemate. For some reason, Clone Zheng could use the support of the black flames on his broadsword to be on par with Zheng's instant destruction. Although it was only an instant of power, it was still enormous. It seemed that apart from burning and defense, it was capable of other marvels. It ought to be like this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to reach the apex of God's realm and be universally recognized as such. How profoundly can this flame be used in his hands? True power isn't based on the power of the skill itself, but the user and its application. This saying can't be any more truer. My clone truly is the strongest. Zheng had been using explosion from the start, and was utterly serious when facing the person titled the strongest. He didn't dare be the slightest bit careless, but even explosion was more or less on par with Clone Zheng's body. Clone Zheng using his black flames put him on equal footing with Zheng's dragon transformation. With his broadsword, he could match instant destruction. Thus, the two were locked in stalemate for a time. Although the two looked like they were on equal grounds, Zheng was actually aware of how hard this was inside. After all, he was on the offensive right now, and was using instant destruction and various skills, such as Saru and Jeppo, to achieve this. Then there was those black flames that aroused envy. Zheng may have looked like he wasn't touched at all by the black flames, but that was actually only by continuously using the power produced by mingling refined chi and magic outside his body to isolate himself from the black flames. Looking at clone Zheng, he still seemed to have some power in reserve. Although Zheng was probing his opponent too and wasn't going all out, such a battle was still a downer. My clone. Come. Let's use our full power to determine victory. Zheng suddenly shouted, when his chi and blood energy began to flow within his body as he prepared to use destruction. No, wait. Something's not here yet. Right, you haven't reached this level yet, so you can't sense him. Without reaching this level or being endowed with unique talents, you can't sense it. Clone Zheng suddenly said these inexplicable words that Zheng couldn't understand. Him. Who, Xian? Zheng's saber was chopping out, and he suddenly asked during a lull. You can refer to him as the beginning, the end. The creator or the destroyer. You can also say he is the maker or author. He is the one who controls our future. Clone Zheng muttered, shutting his eyes as he no longer said anything. Luo Yinglong sped along, but the direction he went off in was slightly different from Gondo's. This made him feel slight doubtful. When someone's power reached a certain level, there would be a certain sensitivity to powerhouses in combat, such as now when Yinglong could sense a tremendous pressure from far off. The Battle of the Zhengs was a battlefield which surpassed the Xians. It was the fight for the main character destiny, and the objective of this world, know the entire God's realm, and the true aim of the final battle. The pressure they were letting off was enough to draw all who had unlocked the fourth stage in. Thus, why would Gondo instead be going further and further away with his power? Did he have something else to do? Maybe, just maybe he had a poor sense of direction? If so, then that would be awesome. If he only reaches after the Zhengs decide victory, wouldn't I be saved? Ha ha ha. Yinglong rejoiced in his heart. He suddenly saw sky sticks that were flying not far in front of him. When he got closer, he saw it was Wangxia, Lu Yu, Junchen and a heavily injured Yanwei. They were squeezing on two sky sticks, and this cramped formation made Yinglong frown. Luo Yinglong. Wangxia's eyes were sharp, and he immediately saw Yinglong. In the information Xian had gathered once of the powerhouses in the realm, this cultivator was one of the more important ones. He was the main combat force of Team Celestial. When he caught sight of him, he thought Yinglong was here to seek vengeance for Adam, especially when he was flying over so fast. Upon seeing Wangxia take a few bombs out, Yinglong hurriedly called out, Don't. I already left Team Celestial and joined Team China. I already met with Zheng and his group just now. You're still throwing it? As his words fell, a miniature nuke exploded not far from Yinglong. The enormous shockwaves easily made it through his hastily erected barrier. But that was all. A flash of azure light instantly enveloped the violent shockwaves. When Wangxia and the rest recovered from their surprise, Yinglong was already safe and sound before them. Hey. I'm telling the truth. I really joined Team China. Zheng and Clone Zheng's battlefield is in front. I was going to go help Zheng. Yinglong looked at the four. He couldn't whack them nor could he kill them, so he could only helplessly continue to explain. I believe you. We'll be dead already if you were an enemy. Wangxia nodded. He understood it after briefly thinking about it. Yinglong was originally of Team Celestial, so he and Team Devil were bitter enemies to the end, so he wouldn't use the four of them to coerce Zheng. Using them to coerce Clone Zheng would be even more ridiculous. Would that strongest person abandon the battle for four unimportant people? The answer was obvious. That was the first thing. Secondly, if Yinglong was here to take revenge for Adam or Team Celestial, he could just kill the four of them directly. Why would he need to join the Battle of Zhengs? Did he want to play the bystander to fish for rewards from the side and try to kill both Zhengs? That wasn't possible with his power even if he was a cultivator. Thus, malicious intent or a conspiracy being at play could be rejected. There was another important reason Wangxia had thought of. Adam had been Team Celestial's strategist. Adam was dead, so did a hothead like Luo Yinglong actually even know the meaning of the words malicious intent and conspiracy? I may not know what you're thinking, but I'm suddenly feeling pretty annoyed now. Yinglong rubbed his temples. He didn't look dashing or elegant in the least now, what with strips of cloth being all that remained on him after what had obviously been a fierce battle. He had also hidden that deep and profound look of his. Thus, he looked like hothead he had been before, so Wangxia wasn't wrong in thinking so. We'll give this woman treatment first. She looks like she's about to drop dead any time now. Yinglong looked at Yanwei who Wangxia was carrying. She was indeed heavily injured. Although her blood loss had already been stemmed, her injuries reached even her internal organs. She was about to die after flying for so long, so Yinglong's arrival right at this time was indeed a coincidence. Is it really a coincidence? Yinglong laughed coldly upon seeing Wangxia and the rest sighing. She's Zhang Heng's girl, that person good at using bows who's one of your elites, right? In other words, her plotline hasn't been resolved yet, so he wouldn't let her die yet. Me coincidentally arriving now is insurance for her survival. No, perhaps there's a double insurance. If an accident stopped me from arriving, You might meet Cheng Xiao, your medic, ahead. As he spoke, Yinglong received Yan Wei and placed her flat on the ground. He then slowly poured his refined qi into her. Yan Wei's wounds patched themselves up at a visible rate, and her face had become much better than that pale pallor before, although she still hadn't woken up. Her life should be saved now. Qi itself has healing properties. If Zheng poured qi into you, it could suppress your injuries. Refined qi, however, is a completely different energy from qi, qualitatively and quantitatively. Its healing properties are equivalent to light of the soul that had the form of life force, and is a top-class healing energy. It's just that it's exhausting. Yinglong exhaled as he withdrew his hand. Wangzi hurried over to Yan Wei's side, only relaxing when he gave her a careful inspection. He turned to Yinglong and asked, "What do you intend to do next? Go along with us to help Zheng." "No, I won't be going with you. I'll be going myself. All of you are too weak, and if you just intrude in their battle like that, you'll die. If you want to join their battle, you need to at least reach Zhang Hong's level. If you're too weak, you'll instead affect the Zheng you're trying to help. You have to know, their battle is something even I'm not able to join in fully." Yinglong shook his head. He paused before continuing. "The mission Xian gave you should have been to defeat Team Celestial, or kill Adam. Next, you all should not interfere with the Zheng's fight. Wait here for the rest of Team China or Team Devil to come. Standing guard should be your most important job. Don't let anyone interfere, until you all gather enough power to intervene. Only then can you join in, understand?" The so-called king versus king and soldiers against soldiers was so. The king was able to single-handedly kill the majority of the other side soldiers, and the kings were practically on the same level. Thus, after the king's evenly matched battle began, as long as the soldiers determined victory and had the ability to influence the battle between kings, then the side whose soldiers won would win. However, the prerequisite was that they had the power to influence the battle of kings. One or two measly soldiers wouldn't be able to do so. That was what Yinglong meant. If the battle between Team China and Team Devil was explained using chess pieces, king versus king was the two Zhengs fight, while the Xians were the most powerful pieces outside of the king. If the rest were compared to pawns, Yin Kong, Zhao Zuokeng and their tier would be worth 2 or 3 pawns, while the weakest tier of Junshan were basically ignorable outside of being used to deal with other soldiers. Thus, this method of battle was, as Clone Xian said, a gamble of probability. The originally weaker Team China had used this plan to successfully close the gap with Team Devil. As for the final conclusion, that would depend on which of the two sides had more power remaining. Yinglong joining Team China was a variable, while to balance the power of the two, Gondo had similarly also become a variable. The will of the heavens couldn't be predicted, and Yinglong sighed greatly in his heart. After carefully exhorting Wangzia and the rest to be careful of Gondo, Yinglong stepped on his flying sword and sped off. He hadn't flown for more than a moment before a dense and dark mass of black flames appeared ahead of him. The hill they were fighting on wasn't too large, and was just a few hundred meters tall. The hill had been completely destroyed in the violent clashes between the black flames and explosion and instant destruction. The incredibly high temperatures reduced the rocks to lava and glass, then a following enormous shockwave from a collision would turn it all to dust. Just the sound from the collisions were enough to kill an ordinary person within 100 meters. It was easily imaginable the destruction that would be caused by these two monsters fighting. And this was the result when they hadn't even gone all out. What if the black flame scale or temperature was just the slightest bit higher, or it was the true destruction or even chaos, Genesis splitter that could flip over the heavens and earth? Yinglong shook his head. He had already considered a lot on the way here. Since he couldn't avoid the coming fatal disaster, he had to try his best to help Zheng obtain the main character qualifications, then revive himself through the main character destiny. Thus, he couldn't let Gondo interfere no matter what. Even if he failed in stopping Gondo, he had to have something to stop him until the two determined victory or Team China gathered enough power. "Hey, the two of you stop for a while. I have something to say." Yinglong was rather gutsy, directly flying into 10 meters outside the domain of their battle. This was the closest he dared get close to. He wasn't afraid of Zheng, but rather Clone Zheng suddenly attacking and killing him. There was another loud collision between Tiger Soul and the black flames as a crater dozens of meters in size was formed. Zheng and Clone Zheng successfully separated themselves as they looked at Yinglong in tandem. "Yinglong? Have you all have determined victory?" Zheng asked. "Lo Yinglong? You dare poke your nose here? Aren't you afraid of dying?" Clone Zheng sneered coldly, opening his mouth to speak instead of continuing to attack. These words aren't the kind Clone Zheng would say. He's too powerful and stands at too high a peak. He wouldn't threaten people with his aloof and arrogant personality. This confirms that Clone Zheng must be able to sense him. Yinglong smiled bitterly as he gestured with his hand. "I don't have much interest in interfering with your fight. I don't think anyone is so bored as to challenge a monster to a fight, right? I'm worried about other people interfering, so I specially came to ask you two gentlemen if you need a battlefield." "A battlefield?" Zheng asked curiously. He only looked carefully at his surroundings now. Indeed, the two's battle had wreaked great havoc, and the hill had been destroyed without them even noticing it. This was still just the warm-up too, so if they went all out, they might even affect the underground laboratory or even further. This battlefield really was too fragile. "So, it's like this. I'm about to face a life and death battle, and basically I'm going to die. But, it doesn't sit right with me if I don't at least try. So, let's have a mutually beneficial deal. I'll lay down an omnidirectional samsara formation. It'll siphon away a portion of the energy that overflows. Apart from strengthening the battlefield so it doesn't break so easily from the power of your clashes, it'll let me borrow some of it too to face the upcoming battle. How about it? It's a good suggestion, right? Yinglong chuckled. The Zhengs frowned, but both had different considerations. One was curious about the battle Yinglong was speaking of, while the other of exactly how much Yinglong was aware of. After a moment, Zheng directly said, I'm fine with anything. If he tries to attack you while you're laying the formation, I'll take the responsibility of tying him down. Whether it'll be successful or not, I don't dare be sure. Unnecessary. Lay it. I myself am interested in seeing if divine abilities can overcome fate. Clone Zheng didn't say anything else, and sat down. He allowed the black flames to burn independently, and even shut his eyes a few seconds later. Thanks, you two Zhengs. I owe you each a favor. If I revive, I'll pay you back when we face him in the future. Yinglong exhaled and took out a rectangular piece of jade the size of his palm. It was covered in layers of fog and pale azure light, making it look like a cloud. Yinglong's expression also turned from joking to serious, gradually becoming more deep and profound. Borrowing the force of heaven and earth. Omnidirectional samsara formation. Deploy. No important changes could be seen once the omnidirectional samsara formation was deployed. But when the two began their fight again as Yinglong left, the earth for dozens of kilometers around began to rise. What followed was exactly as Yinglong described. The black flames didn't burn the ground as effectively as before, while the destruction wreaked by Zheng's power fell as well. Slashes that previously caused damage for dozens of meters now reduced to a mere 10 meters. The amount of mitigation was slowly further increasing as well. The omnidirectional samsara formation wasn't some grand formation. It was just a formation for preparing for cultivator battles. It wasn't even for life and death battles. It was used for sparring in the movie world Yinglong had learned cultivation in. Its unique characteristic was that it was able to absorb the energy that spilled out from combatants within and using it to strengthen the battlefield. The formation itself would also strengthen in the process, allowing those inside to easily exit while making it difficult for those outside to enter, achieving the effect of guarding against interference in the spar. At the same time, in order not to waste the excess energy that spilled out, it would usually be released in the surroundings as spiritual qi. Yinglong was currently directly commandeering the spiritual qi as his own. In summary, as the Zheng's battle got more heated up, the defense against external interference and Yinglong's reserve energy would increase. It did seem like a mutually beneficial result. When he had finished laying the formation, Yinglong stood silently on his flying sword as he levitated in the air. He continuously used his divine will to sense the surroundings. It may not have been as comprehensive as a psyche force scan, but he could scan the things within several hundred kilometers, since it was one of the immortal techniques of the cultivators after all. No, I still can't find him. Is he really the type to get lost easily? That shouldn't be possible. Light of the soul isn't just for show, and it's a high-level AT field. Even if it's weaker than clone Zheng's black flames, it's still stronger than Zheng's dragon transformation. How could he be unable to sense the fluctuations from a battle between powerhouses? Very, very strange. Could it be he is playing tricks again? That might be possible. The other powerhouses haven't determined victory yet, after all. The Xians as well. It looks like the time needs to be delayed some. If Gondo, someone capable of killing many, appears too early, the conclusion will be filled with variables. In truth, Gondo's disappearance really did have to do with the AT field. Suddenly obtaining such a powerful AT field was like if an early 4th stager had suddenly obtained the power of the 5th stage. A critical issue, the lack of control, would appear. Although it wasn't enough to cause a backlash effect on the abnormally powerful body of an EVA, it would still affect his usage of the AT field, including even his most fundamental sensitivity towards power. Thus, he had ended up veering off course by over 1,000 kilometers, before changing direction and flying off even further. He then flew another stretch not shorter to the one before when he changed direction again upon seeing the sea. Compared to Earth, an EVA was simply microscopic, the scale even more tiny than a human holding an ant. Time continued to march on as Gondo slowly familiarized himself with his AT field while Yinglong unhappily continued to search. Wang Zia's group was discussing whether to help Xian, or to head to Zheng's battlefield. Clang. There was a loud and crisp sound as two shadows in the air separated, before vanishing. As their speeds were too fast and had already surpassed a human's dynamic vision, all that was seen were two black blurs passing by. There comes a day when an unripe little apple becomes ripe. This expectation for harvesting and the feeling that it's about to end is really just so complex that it makes me want to kill someone. Zhao Zuokang suddenly appeared on the ground. The dagger in his hand's tiny and rosy red design gave it quite the cute appearance, like it was an ornament. However, in the hands of this evil demon, it was scarier than any modern weapon. The dagger vibrated minutely, turning blurry and indistinct, before the space in front of Zhao Zuokang followed as well. In a moment, the ground, and everything else 100 meters in front of him was reduced to dust. At the same time, he waved his hand lightly in another direction, and a bloody mist sprang out there as Yingkong appeared there. Little apple, you only matured this much. It's rather like a rotten fruit. Zhao Zuokang stuck his tongue out to lick the red edge of his dagger, before giving a slight smile. Yingkong returned the slight smile wordlessly. Her arms and hands were covered in many obvious wounds, although they weren't fatal. Still, the many wounds had stained her upper outer garments red. Fortunately she had unlocked the genetic constraint and had a superhuman constitution. An ordinary person who hadn't received timely treatment would have long since bled to death. This is troublesome. He's fast, unimaginably so. Mach 3? Mach 5? Or even Mach 10 and above. This isn't a speed a human should possess. Yin Kong continued to contemplate how to continue fighting. As the main personality and the true greatest genius in 100 years within the assassin clan, combat was like breathing to her, and even the most unfavorable of situations wouldn't be able to break her fighting spirit. Big brother, you're lying. Your light of the soul isn't telekinesis, but a form of speed, right? This is even faster than Zheng's destruction, though it still doesn't match up to Chaos, Genesis Splitter. It's not the normal speed a human should possess. From another angle, Zheng's extraordinary speed is the result of using energy. You're so fast, yet there are no repercussions, so it can only be due to the light of the soul that the human body innately possesses. What now? Should I use my special skill? Yin Kong inclined her head slightly, making her look very bewitching. The main personality was obviously unlike the secondary personality. Although her eyes were cold, her expression contained a girl's unique adorableness and charm. Oh, I heard that. Little apple, my ears are rather sharp. What special skill? It may be too late soon if you don't use it now. Zhao Zuokan smiled warmly as he slowly walked towards her. The atmosphere between the two turned solemn again, despite no attack being initiated yet. Yin Kong didn't move, and suddenly said, "This is outrageous. It's unfair. Big brother, do you know so much about me because Clone Xian gave you my information? Seriously, our side Xian is so irresponsible and even regularly uses us as bait. So, how about this? Answer 3 questions of mine so I have information myself and can use my full strength. How does Big brother feel?" She was gambling. Gambling on that guess in her heart. HOH. Seems not bad. Sure, ask away. I won the gamble. So, Big brother's intention is to... Yin Kong giggled, not thinking it over anymore but directly asking, if you fought with Clone Zheng, can you hurt him? Could you give him a fatal blow? Yes. Second question. If carrying someone, can Big brother run as fast as now? Yin Kong continued her questioning. I can't. Thanks, Big brother. Then, I'll use my special skill, as repayment for Big brother answering me. Yin Kong smiled. The third question, my little apple. Zhao Zuokan smiled as well while raising his dagger slightly. Yin Kong, who was far away from him, abruptly moved several meters away, as a scar that wasn't too wide, but was very deep, appeared where she had been standing. Haven't thought one up yet, Big brother. My light of the soul, my ultimate killing move. Watch closely. Yin Kong walked towards Zhao Zuokan step by step, Excalibur in her hands. Zhao Zuokan and her materialist in each other's field of vision at the same moment, while narrow yet deep scars continuously formed on the ground around them. Yin Kong's figure was crystal clear in Zhao Zuokan's eyes. Although she was fast, both had reaction speed and dynamic vision beyond that of normal people, and thus Zhao Zuokan's eyes continued to lock onto her despite her speed. However, Zhao Zuokan appeared blurry to Yin Kong. He would vanish from his position from time to time, flashing to another spot within her field of vision. In previous engagements, Yin Kong had never been able to even get near him. Her main strength was force redirection and control in a melee, so a mid-range battle wasn't her forte. A peak combatant like Zhao Zuokan could ignore any mid-range attacks of hers. Thus, she had to use her force redirection and control if she wanted victory. This could be seen from her spar with Zheng. Outside of overwhelming attacks like Chaos, Genesis Splitter, Zheng wouldn't dare tangle with her in close combat using his normal destruction. Every attempt Yin Kong made to close in on him, even if she risked her life to suffer attacks in the process, should have logically ended in her catching him. After all, one was chasing and one was retreating. This was unless he was far too much faster than Yin Kong. But the gap in strength between the two would have been ridiculous if so, and he would need to have unlocked the late 4th stage to do so. Thus, although he was fast, it wasn't enough for him to leisurely retreat from Yin Kong. Curiously however, every single time Yin Kong was about to reach him, his speed would suddenly accelerate, and he would move to the far away with an abnormal speed, making her unable to chase up to him. It would have been fine if that was it, as Yin Kong still had other methods to fight him. However, what forced her to stop every time was his attacking method. The dagger could attack through the air, reaching even 200 meters away. Yin Kong's initial guessed it to be a type of incredibly fast vibrational telekinesis to reach this power and range. But every time Zhao Zuokan used that strange acceleration, despite her clearly having dodged the attack trajectory would bend towards her. As it continued to add up, her injuries were actually much worse than they looked. Perhaps the goose at the start was wrong. The telekinesis was a lie. These doubts surfaced in Yin Kong's mind, she asked those 2 questions. The first, asking whether he could still be as fast carrying someone, was to ascertain if he was using his own body's speed and telekinesis to reach his current speed. The second question was to determine if he had lied for the first question. As the two began their attacks again, Yin Kong once again disregarded injuries to close into Zhao Zuokan. Zhao Zuokan smiled slightly as his speed boosted suddenly again, the dagger not being brandished just once, but continuously vibrating. Everything before him began to disintegrate. Before their dynamic vision, it looked like the air was shattering into pieces like glass, while the ground was sliced into tiny chunks. However, the one sent flying was the person who had attacked, Zhao Zuokang. Yingkong, who should have originally been within this attack range, had suddenly appeared in front of Zhao Zuokang. In the instant he attacked, his stomach and chest had suffered multiple blows, with a sword scar tracing from his right chest to shoulder appearing as well. Although it had only broken open the skin, its position was the heart area, a critical area. A strange attack, my dear little apple. Your light of the soul isn't that bad. Still, why do I feel like I'm facing two people, one attacking me and one escaping my attack range? Zhao Zuokang slowly rose from the ground, his head lowered to look at that injury on his chest, before he suddenly smiled towards Yingkong. How sharp. That keen observation skill is almost like a beast's. Perhaps, big brother, you're the person who is actually the greatest genius in the assassin clan's history. Yingkong slightly smiled, not saying another word, while the atmosphere calmed down some with neither attacking. Little apple, do you know the meaning of this final battle? Zhao Zuokang suddenly looked at the sky, before opening his mouth to speak after a long time. What do you mean? Are you trying to talk about fate or continuing to act crazy? Yingkong asked curiously. No, not such small matters. Zhao Zuokang's head lowered. His slight smile remained, but the madness in his eyes was gone. It's another kind of feeling that I've been feeling recently. But it's fine if you don't know. Speaking of fate, is our fight not counted as fate? Day by day, I've been looking forward to Little Apple maturing and ripening. Now that you're before me, I unexpectedly feel rather reluctant to part in my heart. Is it loneliness? Big brother, Yingkong smiled warmly, and there was no longer a trace of coldness, but instead the warmth towards one's family. I was lonely, just as Big Brother is. I wasn't able to bear those crimes and pain like Big Brother. I was only able to keep sleeping like a child. Is that why you killed my other personality? You felt reluctant to part, or you felt lonely. But I was luckier than Big Brother. Comrades I could trust appeared by my side. Emotions filled my secondary personality's heart, emotions even the sleeping me could feel. That warmth and security let me better understand why you were lonely. That's why I woke up. This time, it's my turn to bear everything. I may not know the meaning of this final battle, but to us, this is our final battle. As she finished speaking, she vanished again. Is that so? Zhao Zuokang didn't move, but suddenly extended a hand. Yingkong shockingly suddenly appeared there, running towards him. However, she was getting slower and slower. Little apple, that is. Not the answer I wanted. If you insist on that answer, I can only pluck you now. Peel off that tender skin of yours. Pick out those pristine white bones of yours. Just thinking about Little Apple rotting like that makes me want to come. With a quiver of the blade, a visible red line flew out in the direction the dagger slashed at, rending apart all in its way. The fabric of space seemed no exception, as scars like the cracks of a mirror were left in it. The red line was directed at the decelerating Yingkong. In but a moment, an invisible heavy sword was suddenly slashing upwards from his right. The slash was very abrupt, but Zhao Zuokang used his dagger to block it as if he already had foreknowledge of it, while he borrowed the sword's force to move backwards. However, just as he moved half a meter away, a jade-white and delicate palm suddenly extended from the direction he was moving in. He didn't dare let it touch him and he immediately accelerated, moving nearly 10 meters away in the blink of an eye. However, an invisible heavy sword was blocking his path of retreat. The acceleration led the sword to piercing directly into his stomach from behind. Although it was only able to penetrate centimeters before he flashed away, this was still the first time Yingkong had harmed him in this fight. How beautiful, Little Apple. Or should I say, my two little apples. Zhao Zuokang rubbed his back, smiling as if he couldn't feel the pain. Yingkong was standing behind him, Excalibur in hand, with several drops of blood on its tip. The drops of blood looked like they were floating in the air. Don't be so shameless, big brother. Your light of the soul is a spatial type, but you said it was the most ordinary telekinesis. That was lying. Yingkong said lightly. Light of the soul was an organism's ability from their deepest parts. Every organism, even the small bacteria, had its own unique light of the soul. However, light of the soul slept in the deepest depths of the human consciousness, even lower than the lower consciousness. This location could be considered where the most fundamental essence of the organism existed. Apart from a tiny minority of gifted people, the majority of people would never touch their light of the soul in their life. Even that tiny majority would only sense its existence, and using it was an impossibility. The word constraint in genetic constraint showed the problem. You had to unlock the constraint step by step until the fourth stage. Each person would be able to tentatively use their light of the soul then. However, their inner demons from the depths of their consciousness would appear too. This was known as the heart's devil. Zhao Zuokang's little sister Zhao Rukong had directly come into contact with the deepest depths of the consciousness and been controlled by her heart's devil, which was why the following tragedies had happened. It was the final and greatest barrier in obtaining light of the soul. Normally, only those who had reached the early fourth stage could use light of the soul. Those who reached the mid-fourth stage and overcome their heart's devil would be able to personalize their light of the soul, such as clone Zheng's Sin Flames and Zheng's Dragon transformation. Every person's light of the soul would display itself differently. However, there were some exceptionally gifted people such as Hao Tian, who had a personalized light of the soul despite not reaching the mid-fourth stage, and Gondo, who could have his personalized light of the soul, an AT field, by relying on merging with the Eva. There was also Zhao Yingkong and Zhao Zuoken who also had it despite not overcoming the Heart's Devil as well. These people all belonged to the category of either being exceptionally gifted or having unique circumstances. Yingkong gave a light smile and continued, I comprehended my light of the soul after merging with my secondary personality. Its name is Mirror of Duality. In the beginning, I was my own person and she was her own person. After merging, I was no longer my own person and she was no longer her own person. But after I had this light of the soul, I remained myself and she remained herself. Big brother, you have to face two of us while fighting. 10. How about you? What's your light of the soul? My light of the soul, Zhao Zuoken smiled warmly. However, his eyes got more and more bloodshot, looking it was being dyed in blood, which looked rather appalling. He enunciated it syllable by syllable, inch step. Big brother, in the end were you unable to let go of your obsession and overcome the Heart's Devil? In truth, Zhao Zuoken's combat power was on the level of the mid-4th stage, but he had in reality never overcome the Heart's Devil. Inch step. Based on the name. Yingkong didn't have the chance to follow this train of thought, because Zhao Zuoken's next attack was already about to reach her. It was a basic charge followed by a thrust, but it gave off the feeling of being unavoidable. Although the dagger was right in front of her eyes, Yingkong felt as if it was stabbing at her from all directions, and she would be skewered regardless of which direction she moved. This feeling was far from reassuring. Is it the pressure from his aura? Impossible, how could I be affected by that? Yingkong didn't overthink it, and her body vanished from that spot, while another Yingkong appeared behind his back, Excalibur slashing towards Zhao Zuoken. Swish. At the moment Excalibur grazed Zhao Zuoken, he didn't hesitate to continue thrusting his dagger forward. Shockingly, despite the dagger clearly stabbing into nothing, a flower of blood blossomed on Yingkong's shoulder. When the shoulder was penetrated completely, she was no longer able to put power into wielding Excalibur, and decisively jumped backwards. Zhao Zuoken. How did you stab me? Yingkong's expression was frosty, no longer carrying any of that charm from before when she smiled warmly. Although her appearance hadn't changed, losing that bewitchingness had given her a heroic air, and that androgynous face had a different kind of beauty to it. It was the secondary personality Yingkong. Little apple, oh wait, it became the unripe little apple. Learn to mature a little. It's better to rely on yourself than others. If you want to know how I managed to stab you, think through it yourself. Zhao Zuoken smilingly thrust out the dagger again. The Yingkong behind him vanished, while another Yingkong newly appeared several dozen meters away from him. Still, the dagger gave her another wound as before. Fortunately, she managed to raise Excalibur in time, or the injury wouldn't stop at her arm. You keep protecting her, little apple. That's something that will only ever be an unripe little apple, you know. Well, it's still better than being plucked by Big Brother, right? Yingkong smiled warmly. My light of the soul is to form two independent mess. One me can appear, while the other will exist in a separate space like she's in a mirror, unable to attack or harm. In other words, I can have one me lure in the enemy while the other can move to a safe location. Thus, I should be undefeatable in short or mid-distance battles. So how is he hitting me? Yingkong continued to think. Zhao Zuoken had been right just now. The secondary personality wasn't the main personality after all, and wasn't able to think calmly regardless of the situation. This was the gap between the talents of the two personalities. Inch step, inch step. If it's a space attribute ability, could it be? Yingkong blocked another few attacks, helplessly letting wounds add up on her body. It was just a simple thrust into what was clearly empty air each time. Inch step. Your light of the soul means that within an area, you can reach any point in its space with but a step? Spatial contraction? No wonder your dagger can attack 100 meters away with a light swing. I really thought it was telekinesis. Looks like this is Big Brother's light of the soul, inch step. The so-called 10-step skill in ancient times referred to any location within 10 steps were part of one's attack range. Did inch step refer to being able to move to any location in the surroundings regardless of distance just by inching forward? With inch step, that small dagger could land 100 hits out of 100 thrusts. It was no surprise that Yingkong wasn't able to dodge no matter how she twisted and turned. If so, then I can't keep dodging. Is that what you mean, Big Brother? Do you want your release faster? Yingkong sighed. She immediately pulled herself together and said, sorry, Big Brother. I definitely will not lose, even if I cannot lose to you. My comrades are still fighting. Even if I can't help them, I still can't let Big Brother go and hurt them. So, Big Brother, together with me, as she spoke, she vanished from her spot. Another Yingkong didn't appear again. This was a true vanishing act, different from before when one disappeared and another appeared. Zhao Zuoken couldn't find any clues no matter how he searched. Little apple. Just hiding won't. Zhao Zuoken hadn't even finished speaking when a heavy sword was stabbing at him from behind. He didn't even turn, but jumped up high into the air, thrusting his dagger forward. However, Excalibur didn't vanish, but a dexterous and gentle hand was suddenly pressing on his dagger. Just like that, Yingkong was smiling prettily in front of him, with only dozen of centimeters between them. Caught you, Big Brother. Yingkong followed along the dagger and lightly pinched Zhao Zuoken's thumb. Everything from Excalibur appearing, Zhao Zuoken jumping up, to Yingkong appearing and pinching his thumb hadn't even spanned a second. Zhao Zuoken's entire body went limp, only his hand that wasn't holding the dagger trembling slightly. My force redirection and control needs force. Big Brother really is familiar with me. But, are you really not going to use force? Yinkong smiled slightly as she didn't continue to attack, her eyes instead briefly glancing behind Zhao Zuoken. There was another identical Zhao Yinkong carrying Excalibur there, except the gaze she directed at Zhao Zuoken was filled with hatred, as well as a vague absent-mindedness. Big Brother, I actually have two light of the soul. Mine is annihilation, capable of annihilating another's light of the soul. Hers is the mirror of duality. Understand? Big Brother can't run away this time. Zhao Zuoken's other hand trembled, but nothing happened. When Yinkong had pinched his thumb, his light of the soul had begun to vanish at a prodigious pace. Of course, nothing came without cost. Yinkong's light of the soul was being quickly depleted as well, while her consumption was twofold as one body was bearing the burden of two light of the souls. Only a powerhouse of Yinkong would be able to pull this off. Others, even those exceptionally gifted like Hao Tian, would have been sucked dry. Zhao Zuoken wasn't shocked, his face still bearing that insane smile as always. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with madness, and yet he was still slightly smiling. He didn't move his upper body, only using his legs to jump up. However, the smile on the Yinkong in front of him intensified, while the Excalibur of the Yinkong behind began to let off an acute radiance. Excalibur began to release the white light, while it slowly changed from being invisible to revealing its true appearance. It was a golden knight's sword, with several unknown inscriptions carved on the ancient sword's body. Yinkong brandished the sword, and a white radiance wrapped around Zhao Zuoken and the main personality Yinkong, before carrying the two into the sky quickly. As the two streaked into the sky, Zhao Zuoken quickly pulled back the hand he was using to hold the dagger, as both sides were within a field of force now. Although this white light could kill them, yet thanks to the natural protective effects of their light of the soul, they were sure to suffer serious injuries. And the impact from being hit. Although that force was being moved, it was still force, which could turn every move of Yinkong into a killing move when using her force redirection and control in this close melee. But it was too late. As two who already possessed infinitesimal control, both could sense the light movements. As Zhao Zuoken abruptly pulled his arm back, Yinkong went with the flow and squeezed in that direction. There was a clear snapping sound as the fingers Zhao Zuoken used to hold the dagger were dislocated. Yinkong also went with the flow of the force to grab his wrist. So, Big Brother. What will you do next? Yinkong smiled lightly again as she dislocated Zhao Zuoken's wrist with a jerk of her hand, before moving to his arm. However, before the wrist was dislocated, Zhao Zuoken had used his remaining, uninjured fingers to flick his dagger away. Zhao Zuoken seemed to have given up on this arm, not caring about Yinkong's actions. He used his other hand to smack the handle of the dagger in the air, the force sending the dagger flying to a weird position. He then pulled back the arm under Yinkong's control, an abrupt twist easily snapping it. Zhao Zuoken didn't even seem to feel the pain, even laughing as he did so, his body shivering slightly in what seemed to be excitement, allowing Yinkong to dislocate the arm. Little apple, it's time for it all to end. Zhao Zuoken smiled slightly. The dagger he had sent flying had somehow ended up behind his back, and it shot forward along his dislocated arm. Yinkong didn't notice the dagger whizzing towards her due to the obstruction of the arm. In the process of dislocating the arm, Yinkong was very close to the dagger as well. Even without his spatial light of the soul, Zhao Zuoken definitely still wouldn't be a weakling that could be played around with. Swish. The dagger easily cleaved off Zhao Zuoken's dislocated arm, shredding through the meat and piercing into Yinkong's hand. At the same moment, he escaped Yinkong's control due to losing his arm and immediately used inch step. His remaining hand pointed, and the dagger autonomously turned around as if there was a hand controlling it. It was still embedded in Yinkong's hand at this time, and it cut her hand off in the process. It didn't stop there, as the dagger lunged at her throat with a flash of red light. It's not so simple, Big Brother. How could I die when I haven't beaten Big Brother yet? Yinkong smiled, not even sparing her lost hand a glance. Her body seemed to flicker, and an invisible sword was suddenly blocking the dagger. Looking again, the smile on her face had vanished, instead replaced by a certain hatred. Secondary personality. Zhao Zuoken had only just reacted when a delicate palm extended from behind, easily fastening itself over his collarbone, two fingers even about to come into contact with his larynx. In an instant, Zhao Zuoken used his remaining hand to point before his light of the soul could be sealed, exerting control on the dagger once again, and commanding it to thrust towards himself. Big Brother, if we grow up. Hey, I'm being serious here. I'll marry you then. Then, I'll find a good husband for Zuoken. Heh, we'll be together forever then. If those old fellows in the clan annoy us, then we'll just exterminate the assassin clan first. What do you think? Big Brother, it hurts so much. It feels like the demons inside are about to burst out. Big Brother, how long can I keep them in check? I've said it many times. When facing enemies, smile slightly, but have coldness in your eyes as you watch the enemy. Don't plaster your face with a dumb smile, Big Brother. Don't die. I said everyone has to live on together, we'll find a way to resolve the lurking dangers in our body, then live happily for the rest of our lives. In the past, 3 children had lonely watched over each other, encouraging the others to live. They had hoped for each to become the light of the other's life, and to find their own light of their life in another. They may not have been able to see the future, but being able to see each other had made them feel very blessed. However, Everything had come to an end, and what had remained was the darkness and coldness from losing light. They could no longer see a path to the future, and they sunk deeper the further they walked. Big brother, for I who have already found a new light in my life. I definitely won't let you sink any deeper alone. The entangled two crashed onto the ground, forming a deep pit in the ground. Yinkong was still tightly sticking onto Zhao Zuokang's back, while Zhao Zuokang was standing silently on the ground. They looked like a pair of lovers if the surroundings and circumstances weren't taken into account. Big brother, this won't do. Are you going to force me again? Are you going to bear the pain and loneliness alone again? This time, I'm not going to let go. In front of Zhao Zuokang, that red dagger was actually piercing towards his heart. However, only half of it had entered. The hand that had originally been around his collarbone, was using its palm to clutch the dagger. Zhao Zuokang's hand was on the handle, intending to stab it into his heart. Big brother, this is the vampiric touch, the rank A magical weapon. It doesn't have any additional attributes, and it's only able to absorb the target's light of the soul attributes, but not the light of the soul itself. It absorbs the special characteristics of the target's light of the soul, and only for a moment. To others, this would truly be something not as useful as it sounded, but to us, all those incomplete created by the assassin clan, it is the only path to survival for us. As Yinkong spoke, tears suddenly began to flow out. They flowed non-stop as she lay on his broad back. The dagger in her hand had already cut open her palm, the blood spilling out flowing along the dagger and mingling with Zhao Zuokang's blood. Our light of the soul has been incomplete since birth. Although it's much stronger than normal people in certain aspects, and we can easily interact and control it, it's exactly because of that it's easier for the heart's devil to control us. The closer we get to the mid-4th stage, the more hopeless it is for us. I only found out about all this when I merged with my secondary personality. This vampiric touch happens to be able to mend the parts we lack, which is why I paid attention to it. It just needs to absorb another similarly incomplete light of the soul, like you or me. We're the only carriers of an incomplete light of the soul as the only members of the assassin clan in the realm. We also happen to have similar levels of power. When this dagger impales us, you'll die first since your heart was stabbed through first. Then, your light of the soul will flow along the dagger to me. I'll thus be able to live on with a complete light of the soul. Big brother, you big idiot. The tears never stopped flowing as she gently rubbed her face against his back. Why did Big brother keep forcing my secondary personality to get stronger? Why did you have to make her stronger even if it was through hatred, warping her soul, venomous words, and violent attacks? Because you were waiting. Waiting for my light of the soul to reach the level of yours, so that I would be able to withstand your light of the soul. Idiot. You're obviously consumed by your heart's devil already, so why did you have to wake up and do all this for me? You big idiot. Yinkong began to sob uncontrollably at this point. She looked nothing like a peak competent, and was obviously nothing more than a broken-hearted young girl. It really is foolish, whenever I occasionally wake up. Zhao Zuokang's back continued to face Yinkong. His eyes were no longer bloodshot, and that cruel smile was gone as well. Only a thoughtful look as if in reminiscence of the past remained. He muttered, I would always think of the three of us in the past when I wake up occasionally. It's impossible to forget. That's why, little apple, even if it's just you, live on for me and Rukong's share. I know you found a new light in your life, and will no longer sink into darkness and loneliness. I'm very happy. As he finished speaking, he suddenly exerted more force, and his dagger entered another fraction. No, you're too selfish. You want to pull my hand along as you stab yourself? It was like that before, and it's like that again now. I hate the big brother that's like this, so. Yinkong suddenly looked away. Another Yinkong had appeared before the two. Her expression was warped, and she walked mechanically towards the two, as if she wasn't in control of her body. It's a secondary personality after all. I can control her even if it's just for a short few seconds. Sorry, I'm forcing you to do this against your will. However, there won't be a next time. Yinkong smiled radiantly as she said softly to the other Yinkong. The other Yinkong held Excalibur aloft, pointing at Zhao Zuokang's chest. And right behind his chest, was Yinkong's body. Little apple, is this your revenge against me? Really, you make me want to give you a kiss. I've always liked you since a long time ago, and yet we. Zhao Zuokang gave a brief struggle, but his light of the soul was under Yinkong's control, and she was using her light of the soul to the utmost, rendering him unable to move. He could only let go of the dagger, reaching out to his back with his blood-stained hand towards his back. There, his light was. The reason for him to live on. The bloody hand gently stroked her face. The blood was warm, and the gentle caress was like a relative's, like a lover's. Big brother, together. I won't let you be alone this time. No, it's not revenge, you stupid big brother. This is my repayment to you. This time, I'll push forward the sword and pierce both our hearts. Let me do it this time. As she spoke, the other Yinkong pushed Excalibur through the two, piercing through their hearts and joining the two together. Other me, thank you. Sorry. If my body dies, my light of the soul should persist another hour. In this hour, help me complete our mission on my behalf. Let Zheng win this final battle. Also, tell everyone, sorry, thank you. A slight smile was on her face as Yinkong's eyes shut. Her hand had already let go of the dagger. Just as it was about to fall, Zhao Zuokan suddenly reached out to hold it tight. The two were smiling slightly as their eyelids slowly fell.